Resident Evil Zero is a very interesting game to me, as it seems like it should be held in high regard with the rest of the Resident Evil series. It does everything that a Resident Evil game should do to be good, and yet it is ranked lower than both the Revelations games, the spin-off series that has elements of Resident Evil but also strays a bit from the path. I think what makes it even weirder is that Resident Evil 5 and 6 both are ranked lower than this, usually specifically because they strayed too far from the Resident Evil everyone knew and loved. My guess is it's because the Revelations series is a spin-off, so it has a bit more leeway when it comes to moving away from the Resident Evil formula. But I still find it very interesting. For you to more fully understand what I mean, let's hop out of the kiddie pool and into the big boy pool, which is my brain. You may wonder why it's called Resident Evil Zero, and to that I'd say it's because it's the 0th game in the series, meaning it comes before the first game. You play as Rebecca, a STARS agent sent out to the infamous Spencer Mansion, accompanying the main characters of the first game, but before you get there, Rebecca's heli has an engine failure and crash lands. She then finds the Umbrella Express train infested with zombies and Resident Evil shenanigans ensue. But wait, a new challenger approaches. The challenger in question, Billy, a convict sentenced to death until the police van transporting him crashed nearby, leading to him finding and boarding the train. We now have the dynamic duo, Rebecca and Billy, and when I say they are a dynamic duo, I really mean it. Sure, the story is really cheesy, there's some funny voice acting, etc., but the charm and the bond these two form were honestly pretty cool. I mean, the setup alone is great. Rebecca Chambers is this police force do-gooder that always tries to do the right thing and is very well spoken, and Billy is a rambunctious troublemaker convict who has recently escaped his own execution by the skin of his teeth. As the game goes on, they have to rely on each other for survival more and more, leading to them warming up to each other, and then we get a scene that I honestly think was done really well and I could genuinely take seriously. When asking if Billy really did kill 23 people, he eventually reveals what had happened. Billy was in the US Marine Corps, and his group were on a mission deep within the jungle to track down the guerrillas' base and confront them. On the way though, they were met with difficulty after difficulty, like being attacked by gorillas or even developing fevers. Once they finally got to the supposed base's location, there were only 4. It turned out that they had bad intel and the base location was actually just a regular village of people, but the squad leader ordered them to massacre the village so as to not come back empty-handed. Billy disobeyed, leading to him getting knocked out and the other 3 in the group rounding up the villagers and killing them anyway. With word spreading quickly about what may have happened when they got back, the 3 decided to place the blame on Billy, saying it was a brief moment of psychopathy. Since he was still quite sane, he was also found to be sane enough to stand trial and ended up being sentenced to death. I did not expect that story in my Resident Evil, but hey, it's 100% welcome. This is easily my favorite part of the story, as it's actually really well done, as well as being character development and even possibly some social commentary about the army, although I'm not confident enough to say that because I don't know much about the army. I honestly can't do this scene justice. It was actually really well done, like I said, and you just got to see it for yourself.
I need to know the truth. Did you kill 23 people? I'm not going to judge you. I just want to know the truth.
It was around this time last year. Our unit was ordered to Africa to intervene in a civil war. Our mission was to raid a hideout of some guerrilla forces located deep inside the jungle. But the hideout was far away from our entry point. Some died from the heat. Others were killed by the enemy. 4 of us survived. Only, there was no guerrilla hideout.
What do you mean?
The idiots in charge had us operating based on wrong information. But we couldn't just go back home empty-handed, oh no. Our leader ordered us to attack an innocent village.
Get rid of them! Kill them all!
Please, sir! Ceasefire immediately!
Shut up! Do it!
I love how they actually both go through a character arc as well. Like, Billy seems very cynical and is overall just a big fat meanie head at the beginning of the game, and who can blame him? He was screwed over by the army and the justice system. I mean, he is literally introduced by pointing a gun at you and calling you dollface, little girl, etc. But through meeting and working with Rebecca, he seems to put his guard down, letting you see more and more of his real self, which is the selfless, trusting person he was back in the village when he refused to shoot the villagers. Rebecca also goes through the arc of starting as the do-gooder that does everything by the book to then doing good based on her moral principles. Such as at the end when she decides to write up that Billy died in the incident so that he may live a happy, fulfilling life where he doesn't have to constantly be looking over his shoulder. This decision, combined with Rebecca's bond with Billy, I believe seemed to give him hope for his future at the end of the game, which is honestly beautiful coming from a story in a flippin' Resident Evil game. He even finally takes off his handcuffs at the very end, probably symbolizing him being finally free once again to live his life to the fullest. I love the final line and especially the delivery too, even though it's combined with a really cheesy thumbs up.
Thank you, Rebecca.
This story just resonated with me more than it probably should have, but that's part of why I kinda love it. It's a surprisingly pretty good story. So, with that, I'll lead into the gameplay, which I believe is the main reason it's ranking lower than the Revelation series for a lot of people, and I completely understand why. It's got your regular classic Resident Evil gameplay with the shooty bang bang, the grabby key, and uh-oh, I'm out of ammo and this zombie is coming right towards me, but the door I have to go through is right behind him. There are two huge, and I'm talking massive differences between this game and other Resident Evil games of this style. You got two playable characters that you switch between, and you got no item box. I know, you just poo-poo-pee-peed yourself. How are there no item boxes, you ask? It's simple. You can now drop an item on the ground anywhere you please, meaning instead of going to the item box to dump all of your green herbs you picked up in the Spencer Mansion, you now can just drop the green herb right where you're standing. I find this system to be fascinating as it simultaneously fixes one problem and creates a new one. Not that I think the inventory management is a problem, that's part of the appeal of this series and why I love it, but it does mix up how you manage your inventory. I think I prefer the item box, but whichever method you prefer I feel is completely subjective, as they both have their own ups and downs. The item box is much easier to not backtrack as much with, while simultaneously possibly making you backtrack even more. What I mean is that there is a specific set location in which you have to go to drop off your items, meaning you may need to go back and forth from exploring a part of the mansion to bringing everything you collected back to the item box. This leads to the possibility of not being able to fully control your set route you take in the game, as eventually you will probably need to backtrack to either put stuff in it or to take stuff out. In Resident Evil 1 backtracking, I sleep. In Resident Evil 0 backtracking, real shit. If it's your first time playing through Resident Evil 0, you will have no idea where anything goes and what key items to have with you, leading to the possibility of having to backtrack halfway across the whole map, or even backtracking from a new part of the map, say the secret laboratory, all the way to the mansion. Meaning in the first game, once you were in a new area, most likely you had all the items you need with you, because the new area would have an item box with all of your stuff. In Resident Evil 0, all of the stuff you drop are dropped right where you drop them. So if you drop a key item off at the beginning of the game and you are nearing the end, you may end up needing it and having to walk for 10,000 hours just to get it back. I think this is the main reason people didn't like it as much as the others, as the backtracking in this one can be soul-crushing if you don't know what you are doing. On the flip side, once you do know what you're doing, this system is much more manageable than the item box because those are set locations you can drop items off at. With this system, you could drop an item right in front of a locked door because you know you need that item for that room later on, so there is an infinite amount of ways to plan out your route to the end of the game. I bring this up because I platinumed Resident Evil 0, and part of the fun of that was planning out my route through the game so that items would be exactly where I need them, when I need them, so that I could beat the game on under 3.5 hours. I believe I ended up with 2 hours, not to brag or anything, but I am your little PogChamp. What adds to the flexibility of this system is that since you have 2 different controllable characters, you can then also plan out who will have what items and what weapons at what times to really get the most out of your run, as well as who will go where, as there are parts where the 2 are separated, but you actually can control who is in what location. All of this adds up to me understanding why people didn't love it, but also why I do love it, and why I believe it's one of the most flexible and abusable Resident Evils in the series, which is why I think it sucks that it seems to be quite underrated. If you want more, they even have 2 extra modes you unlock after beating the game, Leech Hunter and Wesker mode. Wesker mode is exactly what it sounds like. It replaces Billy with Wesker, and it is ridiculously fun, while also actually still having some difficulty because Wesker actually has some positives and negatives to his powers. Leech Hunter though, oh boy, this is the Ethan must die mode of Resident Evil 0, but even harder in my opinion. Leech Hunter took the main premise of Resident Evil and said, what if we took it to insane heights to make it really difficult, but still very fair? In Leech Hunter, you are looking for 100 blue and green leeches throughout the main mansion of the story mode. Obviously, it switched around many things, restricting you by starting with only pistols, and you have to find all the other weapons, and the leeches can't be dropped, meaning once you've picked up a leech, that is now permanently 1 less inventory space, although you can stack 10 leeches in 1 inventory space. Since you have 6 inventory spaces per character, that is obviously how you get 100, as well as the fact that Billy can only pick up blue leeches, and Rebecca can only pick up green. This game mode requires you to learn exactly where everything is, weapons, ammo, enemies, etc. Then you plan out your route, and it's execution time. The execution can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 1.5 hours from my experience, depending on whether you actually succeed or not. Then once you pick up 90 leeches, the game throws a curveball at you, respawning some enemies in the rooms. This is why it requires careful planning, especially if you go for the trophy that requires you to kill all the enemies in Leech Hunter, because you'll have just barely enough ammo and guns to kill all of the enemies. I think what makes it so hard and fun and fair is the fact that your careful planning is your success, although the execution can be what fails you. Say if you just die because you took 1 too many hits from a certain enemy. It's also saying, hey, let's take the idea of management and planning, because that is really what the Resident Evil series is all about, and turn it into a thing where you plan it out and then it takes you 1.5 to 2 hours to execute that plan successfully. It's actually probably one of my favorite modes you unlock in the Resident Evil series so far. The sense of accomplishment I got from beating this mode with all leeches and an A rank under my belt was probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've personally had in gaming. It's also fitting that it then unlocks one of the best perks in the game, which is infinite ammo for all of your guns. That's something I've always loved in Resident Evil games, unlocking really fun, dumb guns and skins and such to use in new playthroughs, and this game is no exception. That's a given for all Resident Evil games though. So, with all of that being said, I honestly think it sucks that this game isn't remembered as fondly as the other Resident Evil games. Even the lesser known entry into the series, Code Veronica, seems to have its own cult following, but Resident Evil 0 seems to be kinda neglected, and I'd like to change that. This video is dedicated to you, Resident Evil 0. Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe in time people will find out how truly epic you are. Resident Evil 0, you sir are a solid 8 out of 10. Now I'm off to go continue my Resident Evil marathon up to Resident Evil 8. And I don't know if I'm going to make a review on every single Resident Evil game, so that's, you know, just, if this is the only Resident Evil review I make, there you go, that's why.
you.